One of the things you might have noticed about me in my preaching is when we hit these big days like 4th of July or Memorial Day or Juneteenth or whatever, I like to talk about them a little. So we're going to talk a little bit about July 4th, since that's the big weekend we're sort of in. And sort of talk about what is Christianity's relationship with July 4th, just like we did with Memorial Day, just like we did with Juneteenth. Because I think it's one of these things that, at least right now in Christianity, is a really muddled world. If you don't believe me, just go find 5 pastors and ask them their opinion of these 3 holidays we've done so far, and you'll get like a million different opinions. Some of the pastors may even disagree with themselves. So here's the thing. When it comes to July 4th, it is centered around this concept of freedom. And I think it's really important for us to talk about freedom as Christians, because I would argue that the highest value that God has isn't love, it's freedom. Now, I know a lot of folks go, what? Isn't God love? And I say he might very well be, but still highest value freedom. And let me explain why. All you have to do is open the Bible to page 1. And when I say page 1, what I really mean is Genesis 1, not page 1, because that might just be a whole, list of biblical, might be the index for all I know. Okay? But get to Genesis 1:1. Start reading, and you'll very quickly get to a very familiar story, the story of Adam and Eve, which is really odd. Because if you think about it, if we were just trying to make like a theological statement about how the beginning came or how creation came about, John does that just fine in the Bible, right? The beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and God was with the Word, blah, 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 word, okay? All of you who've read John 1 knows what I'm talking about here, okay? And that's perfectly good from a theological standpoint. Then why have the Adam and Eve story? In fact, you even have the creation story before you get to the Adam and Eve story, right? You have, there were so many days, and God created this and that day, and then rested on the 7th. Why stop and talk about Adam and Eve at all? The reason, I think, is because it gets at the relationship between God, humanity, evil, and freedom. See, God controls everything. So when you look at the Adam and Eve story, I don't think it was a mistake or an accident that Adam and Eve fell. I think that was God's plan from the beginning. I think God knew exactly what they're doing because, frankly, any parent of any child knows the last thing you do if you do not want a child to touch something is to walk up to them and say, this thing, this giant red button, whatever you do, do not touch it. Because if you did, bad, indescribable things will occur. So you all know, don't touch the red button. Now, half of you are probably thinking, where is the red button? I would like to click it now. Okay? Because that is human nature, right? They have done, psychological studies from every nation over multiple generations show that if you do that to humans, even if they're adults, most of them are going to hit the red button just to see what's going to happen. Okay? And yet God does that right there with the tree. Like if you didn't want them eating the tree or eating the fruit of the tree of good and evil, how about, don't make it a fruit tree. Like seriously. But I think God does that because God values love. But there's a contingency on love. Is that love cannot happen if there isn't first freedom. Think about it. You can't make someone love you. Right? There is nothing in the power of any human anywhere at any point to ever make any other human love them. Because it always has to be a choice. And if it ceases being a choice, then it ain't love. It's something else. Right? So what does God do? He has to give a choice between good and evil. Because if there isn't a choice between good and evil, then you could never choose the good. It's sort of like when you go to vote and there's like one person on the thing and there isn't a write-in slot. You don't really have a choice of who's going to win that election, do you? That isn't actual freedom, right? There's all sorts of countries around the world that are controlled by dictators who have elections all the time where it's their name or don't vote. And they win It's amazing, right? That's not freedom, right? We all get that. And so what does God do? God gives us the choice between good and evil. Why? Because when the choice between good and evil exists, then there is space for love. When you can choose to love God or not, then you can truly choose love. See, God so much wants relationship with us, wants a loving and caring mutual relationship between us and God, that right off the bat, God allows evil to exist. Because a world without evil would actually be worse than a world with it. Because a world without evil would be a world without choice, and a world without choice would be a world without love. And nothing is greater than love. So why bring this up on July 4th? Well, because I believe that it is the maintaining of this freedom, even when it's hard, even when it's difficult, even when you don't feel like you're winning, even when you don't feel like it's your side coming out first or whatever. That is very important to humanity. And it's not just in the American context. Like, I know July 4th is sort of a particularly American thing, but if we really think about July 4th, if we really look at the history, it wasn't just America involved, right? Let's understand that the reason that our founding fathers had the concepts of freedom that they did was because of two main things. One, an English parliamentarian who's currently skipping my brain as to what his name is, dug up the Magna Carta that had been hidden for multiple generations, going all the way back to King John, dug it up and showed the Parliament of Europe, or England, and the United Kingdom, who went ahead and turned around and rejected him quickly, but the American colonists went, oh, let me see that. That's an interesting idea. And the writings of folks like John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, French and English men, who wrote from the academies that were founded generations before them with the Greeks. See, the story of freedom, the story of freedom that we talk about is a story of freedom that started before us, continues after us, and we mark the 4th as a major victory for not just us as Americans, but for the world when it comes to freedom. Because we lived in a world of kings and queens, monarchs and strong men, and then suddenly a group of colonists, with help, by the way, from both Spain and France and the Netherlands, or the Dutch at that time. Let's not forget, we didn't do it alone. If you're sitting there going, what is he talking about? You need to look at American history. We didn't do it alone. We never do. See, the thing about freedom is that we as Christians, even though we go beyond national boundaries, beyond partisan boundaries, beyond state boundaries, we promote freedom. Because within freedom, there is love. The great mistake Europe made for many years was to have state religions. It's why Christianity in Europe is not in good shape, or at least in Western Europe. Why? Because they took away freedom. Without freedom, you don't really get love, and without love, you don't get faith. They're sort of dominoes. But that's why we, as Christians, should take a moment in the 4th and realize that we are marking a point in a struggle that we still have today to retain and promote freedom here and abroad. And true freedom. Freedom that allows good and evil. Freedom that allows dissent and encouragement. Freedom that's going to create unity sometimes and disunity other times. Because freedom, from the beginning, while beautiful, is always messy. As you go out on this 4th of July, I want you to take a few minutes and ponder the question of freedom. Now, the way I think is most challenging to many people, but what I would encourage you to actually do, is take a few minutes. Because I think too often we focus in on the messiness of freedom, not the beauty of freedom. And think about what your life would look like somewhere else, somewhere not as free as here. You can pick your country, China, Russia, whatever. And then take a moment to enjoy the freedoms you have. The other thing I would encourage you to do is too often we, in our freedom, decide to vilify whatever the other side of the political spectrum is. I always promote folks to remember that the vast majority of folks on both sides of the political spectrum are good people. And there are bad people within both sides of the political spectrum too. We get focused on those way too often. And so I encourage you, take a few minutes on this July 4th. Instead of pulling towards disunity, take a moment to pull back towards unity. And do it by taking the 3 issues you are most passionate about. Okay? You probably know the arguments of why you're passionate about it. Take time over this weekend to figure out why the other side, whatever that be, is passionate about the other side of those arguments. And not in a dismissive way. Don't sit there and say, well, I'm for A, and they're for B, and I'm for A because I'm smart and intelligent and a good person, and they are dumb, bad people. That's not what I'm talking about. That's disunity. What I'm talking about is take some time and ask yourself, could I actually answer in a respectful way why someone might passionately disagree with my top 3 issues, whatever they be? So go out, give this a try. Let me know how it goes.